Well, the closing of the Activision Microsoft deal is a big step forward for the two companies themselves. The next question is how the two sides come together and the impact that they may provide on the video game industry. Pleasure to be joined by Harbir Singh, who's a management professor here at the Wharton School. He is also co-director of the Mack Institute for Innovation Management. Harbir, great to talk to you again.
Yes, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. All right, so obviously this is a deal that's been talked about for a while. It's
Right.
now starting to move forward. What was your reaction to the deal itself and the potential impact of these two companies?
Well, it was actually quite a remarkable deal. It was the largest deal that Microsoft had made, and at $68.7 billion, it was a very, very large step. It was also truly transformative, and you could see that in the impact on Sony when the stock price of Sony on that particular period went down by 13%. So it was a significant impact on the what people saw as the PlayStation-oriented gaming business. But also, it was a way for Microsoft to really get time to market. This was something that they had kind of been envisioning, and they had several offerings based on the Xbox and applications on the Xbox. But Activision Blizzard gave them, large numbers of users with Candy Crush and Call of Duty and other such games, and also multiple platforms, including the mobile, the cloud, and many others. So I think this is truly a transformative deal. And the other point that's worth making is that tech companies have been growing through acquisition at a remarkable pace. And so just a few years ago, they were relatively skittish about making acquisitions because worrying about loss of talent, which is a real issue, and also about organizational culture differences and so on. But they have gone into this with both feet.
So then is the expectation that maybe we will continue to see even more types of acquisitions in this tech space as we move forward? Because especially if these two companies are able to come together relatively seamlessly.
I think that's exactly right. The question is, what is the competitive reaction from other players? And they will also need to sort of access this market, which is moving very, very fast. It's a source of revenue, but there's also platform sharing. People are working across platforms, users are working across platforms. And I think the key issue, which is tied to my sort of interest in technology and innovation, is that firms are recognizing that internal development is a bit slow. And therefore, even though you might have fewer cultural differences, sometimes you don't win with your internal products. Partnerships are useful, alliances are useful, but then there's a question of the end game. And when it comes to the end game, as in how do we share the returns over time, and is there an opportunity where, in fact, one player needs to take charge? And I think that's the issue with this gaming industry, that you cannot have Microsoft and Activision being offered as a pair over the long run. So you really have to sort of decide whether you want to access control, but then you have to manage the relationship.
Why then does a company like Microsoft go ahead and make an acquisition like this of Activision when they certainly have the resources to probably build out a lot of their own aspects of what they're going to be getting from Activision?
Right. Well, you can think about Google buying YouTube, right? Even though they had tremendous resources to do so, and it was because YouTube was a platform that actually was had users and was already integrated fully as a platform. They also invested in Android, which became a huge ecosystem. So these companies have recognized, unlike previous years where you had, or previous decades really, where you had companies getting disrupted by the startups. They're still getting disrupted, but what they're seeing is maybe I should buy the startup or partner with a startup that's actually winning in their space. Now you're going to make some mistakes, but then those mistakes are small in relation to the payoff if you get some of these right.
Satya Nadella, after this deal was announced, mentioned that he felt that this allowed Microsoft to make a real contribution to consumer markets. And
Mhm.
I found that interesting because I think of Microsoft and all the different products that they bring to market as one that has already connected with the consumer. I
Right.
guess he didn't feel that way, and that Activision really gave them that path to be able to do so.
Yes, and it's fascinating you mentioned that because Steve Ballmer, who preceded Satya, did a phenomenal job in many many ways. But his idea was to focus really on the Office platform, right, and those kinds of applications. And so they did well with that, and they never really had enough of a strength in the entertainment area. And I think Apple kind of showed that you can be seamless across on the mobile devices. And Xbox, in a sense, was always a little, it was a hardware-based second platform, right? Whereas Apple had this digital hub across all platforms. So, and in fact, Satya was when he came in, he had to resurrect the mobile business. Now that meant that there were developers already there, but to sort of give them the visibility and the resources. And this is sort of a step where you're getting to the entertainment desktop, but it's no longer a desktop. It's the mobile platform, it's the cloud, it's streaming, it's all those possibilities.
How much does Microsoft need to put its own fingerprint on Activision as it moves forward? Or is it easier just to, I mean, obviously Activision has been a very successful company. Do you leave it run primarily the way it has run, maybe with just some minor touches here and there?
I think that's an excellent question, and that's the core issue. What Microsoft did with LinkedIn perhaps is the way they need to manage Activision, which is they left LinkedIn largely alone. And this was the fear when they bought LinkedIn, that they might actually lose the community because, Microsoft still has this complex image, right, of being kind of a, more a business application kind of firm. And now you're in a territory of individual users of all ages in the case of Activision. So they have a template with their acquisition of LinkedIn, which they would be, it'll be advised to pursue that. In other words, autonomy to the unit, giving it the complementary resources it needs, and also sort of ensuring that the culture of Activision remains what brought it to this point. You might actually manage you may disrupt the culture through this acquisition.
That was going to be my next question because you obviously want this to be as successful a deal as possible.
Yeah.
And for Microsoft, they probably have to be aware of not trying to overdo it as they kind of bring all these elements on board.
Absolutely. And there's a real danger of this is where tech firms have had a long history of failures where they send in, armies of people who have good intentions, but they're saying you have to adopt this system, you have to adopt this way of doing things. This is our process for making decisions. And, immediately you're imposing bureaucracy on the other side. And I think that is a real danger that they have. They seem to have done well with many of their more recent acquisitions. So, but this is something that they have to continue to follow. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that culture really is about shared norms, values, and beliefs. And those are already all set in Activision. It's a big, big organization, $69 billion in value.
Yeah.
It's got revenue, it's got developers, it's got lots of assets in place. And the first question they would have is this a penalty for success? We did well and now we're being bought by this company. Luckily, Microsoft's image is positive and can actually be helpful, but that's not enough. You need to ensure that the innovation engine remains intact.
So then look at this from the other side, from Activision side, and where do they see the best paths to success and adding on to the success they've already had as they move forward?
So on that front, this is a great transaction because they can get the scale of Microsoft, they can get the complementary resources, they have long-term durability in their strategy, and I think a way to manage this, and there are some templates actually going quite far back. IBM bought Lotus for networking software, and actually the way it was managed was Lotus was accessing the resources. So they were asking them to use the parent as a menu of possible resources, and you kind of cherry pick what you want. So that would be an ideal kind of situation if Activision kind of drives the choice of complementary resources from Microsoft. Capital, of course, is easy, but the rest of it, how to seamlessly connect to the platforms Microsoft also has, the cloud, for example. Those are important issues to think about.
How do you think then the remainder of the tech sector looks at this acquisition as it's gone through? And obviously, the other side to it is also the process that it went through with all the regulatory hurdles that it
Yeah,
had to clear, both here in the U.S. and
yeah.
abroad as well. How does the industry as a whole look at this deal?
This is a transformative deal. It is changing. You can almost think about the ecosystems, of users, and the now Microsoft has a position as into a major player and actually providing their ecosystem in addition to that of Activision. So players in the industry now need to recognize that there are deep pockets. There is a long-term perspective, and so how do the sort of the relationships among different players with long-term connections between them, how do those relationships change within their own ecosystem? So that's the first point. The second point is speaking to the antitrust issue, which is, I think, a really, really important issue. It was a real surprise to many that because the antitrust authorities had actually mentioned that they're going to take a very hard look at this, lots of scrutiny. But the European side actually, the British authority in particular, the Competition Markets Authority, sort of indicated that they were willing to go along with this. And I think that was the signal that other players kind of saw as indicative of how this will go forward. Because the very thing that we say is a good deal for Microsoft can be seen as anti-competitive from an
Sure.
antitrust point of view.
You mentioned the word ecosystem a moment ago. You've mentioned
Yeah.
a couple of times in the interview. And I
Mhm.
guess from Microsoft's perspective, there's an element of what Satya Nadella and the company wanted to kind of reach, looking at, as you said, what Apple has kind of set up.
Yes.
And I guess to a degree, Amazon is kind of in that same boat as well.
Yes.
They have both built ecosystems that allow people to come in maybe at one touch point, but
Yes.
also be able to benefit from so many other touch points. And
Yes.
and I guess that's what Microsoft's looking to try and build as well.
Yes, I think the complementary resources, the complementary activities, and users have kind of, there was the thought kind of just a few years ago that an ecosystem has to be open, but the Apple evil ecosystem is kind of partially open. It's also very proprietary, the iOS, and people have been willing to live with that for now. This is always a question. I think Microsoft has had traditionally a more, open ecosystem, and the seamlessness of these kinds of applications like games and the other activities that you can get from other parts of the ecosystem that Microsoft has is potentially a real asset. And by the way, it's all about time to market. And the other concept for you that's interesting in this discussion is market value versus replacement value. Okay, so $69 billion. What it would take to actually replace Activision through Microsoft's own activities, whether it's internal or through partnerships? And without doing proper calculations, there aren't, these are not tradable assets. You have to buy
Right.
them. You can't sort of, if they don't want to partner with you, there's no other choice.
Yeah, you're talking about the investment that it would take for Microsoft to build out each of the components that they would
Yes.
need to get to where Activision is right now.
And they have tried, of course. They've had the
Yeah.
Xbox ecosystem and so on. And, the user base is not as strong. I mean, this happens, you realize you're not winning a particular race.
Yeah.
But you have complementary assets. There's value on both sides here. It's not as if they're just buying into it and holding.
Let me finish up by asking you one of the questions that's obviously been out there a lot around AI and
Mhm.
thinking about this deal and thinking about tech in general, how AI will be impacting these companies and these types of deals moving forward.
Right. I think that's also a very, very important question. We are so early in the evolution of AI. It's almost like the early stages of, microprocessor chips, and look how far they came. And this is not even hardware based. So the possibilities are still emerging. But there's no doubt that there will be an impact in many, many ways, including how users end up using AI, but also how developers use AI. So I think that from the development side, you might see dramatic changes. within the gaming arena, and also in applications.
Harbir, always great to get your insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Harbir
Enjoyed
Singh,
it.
management professor here at the Wharton School, also co-director of the Mack Institute for Innovation Management.